الله أكبر
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه. بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters, before getting into the theme of the Khutbah today, I want to ask that we make a generalized dua for the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad but also our Muslim majority populations of countries in the world and the Muslim minority populations anywhere in the world. And the reference that I'm making today is not one because of boom or because of oppressive conditions. But I want us to make dua today for our believers, whether we're in small communities or large communities or in Muslim majority nations, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps the light of Islam in our hearts. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have our seeking His pleasure above anything or anyone else. And I'll say this, the reason why I'm prompted to ask us to make this dua. You and I know the condition of this ummah. And I'm not talking about what's being imposed on us from the outside. All we need to do is just look at some of our Muslim majority countries today. And I pray you don't get mad at me, upset with me for something I'm about to say. But I want to make this point that has become evident that the leadership of many, if not most, of our Muslim majority countries has strayed away from the commitment to follow and implement the guidance and laws of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the revelatory laws coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at what's going on in just a few of our Muslim countries today. And please don't get upset. I'm just speaking the truth as I see it. Look at a country today like Saudi Arabia, a country, the home of the two most important, the most endeared, the most sacred places for Muslims on the face of the earth. Look at what's going on in this nation. Look at how, even though the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has said that there should be no disbelievers in Mecca, that this is an area that's restricted, or only those who believe. If you're a disbeliever, you can't even come into Mecca. But what are we seeing unfold in our lifetime? A very sad situation where in the name of developing a more vibrant tourist industry in the country, now you go to Hajj and you may see a sight that those who've made Hajj many years ago or just a couple of years ago, that you see a different sight, because in the name of building the tourism in the countries, now non-Muslims would be allowed, not just during special times of the year, but my understanding throughout the 12 months of the year. This is something, with my little understanding of Islam, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself had forbidden. It's not something that's subject to interpretation. As I say, I stand to be corrected. Look at what's going on in a country that many of us, because of being the home of the most sacred sites in all of Islam, look at some other things, and I won't even get into specifics about what is going on in this land. Look, and this may be something else that you may disagree with, because many may think, I don't know in this room or not, in this musalla or not, but many believe that Shia, those who follow the tradition of Shia Islam, are not even Muslim. That's not something that I personally subscribe to. But I want to point out something to you. After so many centuries of Islam and practicing their understanding of Islam, out of 75,000 masajid in the country of Iran today, over 50,000 of these mosques have been shut down. Why? Because the government says that no, you can't have open mosques anymore. No, it's because the attendance at these mosques no longer justify paying light bills or paying other bills associated with the maintenance of a mosque. There's so many of our young people and even the older people are not even looking to attend salah in the masjid. They may still be making prayer. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu has emphasized, go to the masjid, 27 times greater reward. And in an overwhelmingly majority Muslim country, 50,000 of 75,000 masjids have been shut down. And not because of outside interference of people afraid that it's going to get bombed. I can go on and on. Brothers, in this particular country, let's make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases our iman to the point that there's nothing more important in our lives than the practice of this faith of Islam. Brothers and sisters, I'm just going to take a short period of your time. And I want to remind myself and remind you of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so much freedom while we're on this earth, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He referenced it in the Qur'an, that if it were His will, He could just kun fayakun, everyone would be a believer. No one would have any practice, any belief other than that of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the option. You and I know, Wallahu that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power over everything. There's nothing beyond the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But yet He gives us the free will to accept His message or submission or to reject it. I want to just take just a few moments to emphasize the importance. How do we keep this love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our hearts? What do we do to try on every single day when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns our soul the next morning? What do we need to do to keep our iman, this faith, vibrant, alive, and loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the guidance that He's given to us? When we look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we can find that there's one thing that no matter what you know about his seerah, how he conducted himself after receiving the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of you know this, but I'll just remind myself, and for maybe some real young children, maybe they don't know. That the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, before receiving wahy, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a very, very successful merchant. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in a merchant town, and that's what Mecca was. They weren't traditionally farmers. They were merchants. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ excelled in this trading enterprise. That the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was universally beloved by everyone that knew him. They talked about how he was Alameen. They talked about his sincerity. Everyone recognized that the character of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was something that was enviable to other people. We wish that we could be as honest as Muhammad ﷺ. We wish that we could be as dedicated and loyal as Muhammad ﷺ. But the moment that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was given the command to preach this message openly, let the public know, don't just go around to your family, preach to everybody now. What did he do? He climbed up the hill of Safa. And the tradition was that whenever there was an extremely important announcement for everybody who could hear the person's voice, individuals would climb up to the top of Mount Safa. And this is what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did. And you know the story better than I. That he stood on the top of Mount Safa and asked the people, if I were to tell you that an army is approaching and they're coming to attack you, they're coming to try to destroy you, he asked those assembled, would you believe these words? Would you believe what I'm saying? And the Sirah literature tells us that everybody who heard the sound of his voice, they exclaimed that yes, Muhammad, if you tell us that an army is approaching, we would believe what you're saying. If you say that they're coming to destroy us, we wouldn't doubt for a second what you're saying. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, after getting their attention, then told them, well, you would believe about an army. So believe what I'm saying to you now. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made his first public invitation, calling those who could hear his voice to submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But immediately, all of those proclamations about how you're the trustworthy, you're honest, we admire everything about you, that immediately turned now to hatred. It immediately turned to people calling him a liar. Why are you getting our attention to just lie to us like this? You know who we worship. You see the 360 gods that people come to worship these things, and we believe in them, in the realness of their existence. And so from the time that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ proclaimed this message publicly, from that moment to the moment that he took his last breath, his life was a life of sacrificing feasibility. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read these few hadith or ayahs from Qur'an. I'll paraphrase the meaning of these narrations. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, once Islam had been established in Medina and he was relatively comfortable sitting around talking to the Sahaba, he said to the Sahaba that my Lord has offered me to turn the valley of Mecca into gold. And that this valley of gold would be designated for only me, that I could do whatever I wanted to do. If you want a valley of gold there in Mecca, Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad said to those Sahaba around him, Allah will give you this valley of gold. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ responded, no, my Lord. I would rather eat one day and on the next day not even have anything to eat. Because when I eat one day, I'll turn to you and thank you for supplying me with something as basic as food that we need for our very existence. And on that day when I don't have anything to eat, I'm not thinking about gold. I don't want gold. But on that day when I don't have anything to eat, I will turn to you, I will beg you, because you are the one who is Al-Razak. You are the provider. And so I'll turn to you. I won't go and ask other people if I don't have anything to eat. And the life of the prophetic life of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi bears testimony to the truthfulness of what the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi said. There's so many hadith that speak of how the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu in Medina, there's one where the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu said that it seems like one of his hunger partners was Bilal ibn Rabah. And in this particular hadith, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu said that there were days when Bilal and I didn't have anything to eat other than what Bilal had up under his arm, which was not much. It may have been a couple of days, just a little bit of bread. And the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu said that I was sharing in this sacrifice with Bilal. There are other hadith that we know that the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu never ever ate to his full, to be full. That his sacrifice, because of his belief and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he instructed us to sacrifice even when food is so readily available. Don't gorge yourself. Eat 1/3 of food, 1/3, say 1/3 of water, and the rest third of this little organ called a stomach, and it's a small organ. Save that for air. Don't ever eat till you just feel stuffed. That's the only thing that you can do. This was a sacrifice on the part of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Whatever he wanted, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had promised that he would give. Whatever the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wanted, that it was all he had to do was just ask for it. So he didn't go around hungry because he didn't have provision from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if he wanted. Brothers and sisters, when we look at the prophetic life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we find that that life is instructive for us about the relationship between struggle and how Islam is placed into the hearts of individuals and how this faith is planted in a society and just rooted in the society based on our degree of sacrifice, feasibility. Let me just give just a couple of quick examples. You know better than I that the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu has said that the best generation of Muslims that will ever walk the face of the earth are those who were with him, the Sahaba. Those who embraced Islam at the time of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, and it wasn't a shahada way out somewhere. They had to see the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu as a believer. And that generation, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu said that this is the best generation that will ever walk on the face of the earth. And what does that generation have in common when we read the thousands of stories of the brothers and the sisters who were a part of this first Ummah under the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu? What do we find? We find sacrifices that were made by these brothers and sisters that we can only just imagine. We're talking about willingly sacrificing their lives, putting themselves knowingly in harm's way to be punched, to be beaten, to be killed, only because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allowing the light, the nur of Iman to grow strongly in their hearts. So if you and I want to continue waking up every day, having that spirit of sacrifice, feasibility, then you and I, if we want to keep Islam in our hearts, if we want to keep Islam in our society, so that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren will have a love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not fall victim to what so many others in this nation have fallen victim to and start to move away from their beliefs. All praise is due to Allah. We praise Him and seek His assistance against the evils of our minds and against the unsuccessfulness of our actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, no one can guide astray. And whomsoever Allah causes to err as a result of their own actions, no one can guide to the right. O Allah, help those who help the religion of Muhammad and countless amongst them, and disgrace those who try to overturn the religion of Muhammad and do not make us of those. Brothers and sisters, the importance of sacrifice in the lives of each and every one of us cannot be exaggerated. That even though we are in a society which is kind of rapidly changing, if you just look at the social markers of this country, that the attractiveness of America to Muslims and other people around the world is not what it used to be. Even the immigrants who come into this country seeking work, fleeing persecution in their home countries, in the southern hemisphere, the southwestern hemisphere, from Central and South America. There's statistics now that tell us that when many of the men and women coming from Mexico, coming from Ecuador, but Mexico in particular, which is right on our border, that more are leaving the United States than those coming into this country. And we can look at the social markers that distinguish any nation, and we see that the America that was once that strong and mighty nation is an America today that is in hock. That so many countries like China, like Saudi Arabia, that the multi-billionaires and the businesses in many of these countries, just by way of example, own so much of American property that you would be shocked to learn how many businesses, much property is owned by those other than someone in this country. The America that was projected, has been projected to the world, is changing. And so what is our responsibility as Muslims? What should we do within our own households, within our communities, to be able to not just succumb and fall into the negative habits and practice just because something has been made legal in the United States today? The sense of morality of the Muslims has not changed since the revelation of the Qur'an. Our individual sense of what is right and what is wrong may change, but know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a deen with values, spiritual, moral, economic, every aspect of human life, that these things don't change. And so, as we try to navigate socially this environment in which we live today, my reminder to myself and reminder to you that if we want to maintain a clarity as to what is demanded of us as Muslims, sacrifice fi sabilillah. Sacrifice for the cause of Allah. Knowingly do something that may be inconvenient to you. But you're doing it for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are doing it so that the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be supreme in this country. And so when we look, there's some basic things, and I'll sit down. But then when we look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed this small Muslim community to evolve from where we started from to where we are right now. That most of you don't know where this community started from, where we were housed. The first place was in a virtually abandoned building on the third floor of right in the edge of downtown. It was like almost an abandoned building. And I won't go through the other three places that we have been. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with this property. It's no longer scorching hot in the summertime or freezing cold in the winter, the way that we had been in the past as we move, as Allah allowed us to get to where we are now. And I'm not saying it's nothing special, but I'm just reflecting on the degree of sacrifice that those brothers and sisters made in order for us, and Allah rewarded the sacrifice for this small community to even be where we are today. There is nothing that you and I can accomplish by way of this deen without sacrifice. And so to make a sacrifice, am I going to buy a new car? And I'm not criticizing anybody who does this, but every 2 years, will I get a new car? Will I get a new this, a new that? Or will I use some of the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me? And it doesn't have to be a lot, because the Prophet ﷺ has made it very clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards us not on what we give, but what is our capacity to give. And then we give what we can. So if I only have $1 in my pocket, and I give 50 cents of that dollar, is equal, as the Prophet Muhammad has made it clear, is equal to someone giving 1,000. What is our capacity? What is our capacity to come to this mosque 5 times a day to make salah? Is it that we are sick every morning at Salatul Fajr? Is it that there's something stopping us, the police forming some kind of cordon so that we can't drive down the street to get to this mosque or some mosque for Salatul Fajr? Do we never have a lunch break that we can take during the time of Salatul Dhuhr? Do we get off work at a certain time and we're working somewhere in the downtown area, somewhere close? Is there some time we can come to Asr? Is there some time we can come to Salatul Maghrib, Salatul Isha? Knowing that degree of sacrifice. The Prophet Muhammad said that every time we come to the masjid to make salah, the reward for each one of those salah is 27 times greater than what it would be if we made it in our homes. If we just fell out of bed, made wudu and made salah right in our bed. Brothers and sisters, we don't, in closing, we don't want, none of us would want to see phenomena like over half of the mosques in the United States being closed down because there were not people to sustain it. There weren't enough people interested in coming to the mosque, so they had to shut them down. But this has happened in the Western Hemisphere. It's happened throughout South America, when many of our Muslim brothers, merchants inhabited countries in South America and built beautiful mosques, huge mosques, with beautiful chandeliers and these kinds of things. But because the sustainability, the keeping the love of Allah, the love of those mosques is present. Brothers, I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but brothers who I trust have said that they've been in some of these countries in South America and they've seen these buildings and the kind of disuse. Nothing is happening there. Stray dogs are running through these facilities and this kind of thing. There's no guarantee. So let us sacrifice to the best of our abilities. If we want Islam for our children, sacrifice now. If we want Islam for grandchildren and great, and see a continuation and an improvement and a growth in Islam in this country, is going to come from yours and my sacrifice today, right now. Let me give a couple of announcements here. Tomorrow, June the 10th, and there are flyers all around the mosque. The Department of Women's Affairs is sponsoring a yard sale and chicken dinners. Like I said, there are flyers around. This will start tomorrow at 8 a.m. and it goes on to 2 p.m. If you haven't had these dinners that these sisters prepare, you get it. Allah.